Well, during this session, we are going to make a quick overview of the RAISD project, including its background, research hypothesis, and some hints about the development of the project. So, refugees crises have been continuous all over history. Over the last years, they have been gaining increasing relevance because of the number of forcibly displaced people involved, and also because their impact all over the world. Just some recent examples are the crises in Syria, Afghanistan, or lately in Ukraine. But there are also others with less impact on media, like for instance those in Africa, Central Africa, Sudan, Somalia, Congo, or in Asia, like the Rohingya crisis. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees forecasts that this year there will be more than 100 million people of interest, a figure that has been increasing all over these last years. Everybody has been overwhelmed by the images of this crisis, generating feelings and reactions of sympathies towards these forcibly displaced people. But the attention to these people needs to go beyond these initial reactions. And what is there after that? Well, the recent crisis caused by the Ukrainian war gave us some ideas. In an unprecedented effort, the European Union is bringing a funding of 70 million euros to support the approximately 5.7 million people that have left Ukraine. This funding goes for their reception, attention, and inclusion in the different countries. And in fact, most of the European countries at least have already well-established systems to address this kind of crisis, because it's not the first one of this kind that we are facing. There are plenty of programs for forcibly displaced people, but unfortunately, we consider that they tend to be very general, in the sense that they disregard part of the particular features of the groups that they are attending, and also because sometimes they even ignore part of the particular features of the host communities. And all this causes a reduced impact of these efforts. So this is the focus of the RAISD project, that effective attention and inclusion strategies need to consider these particular features. And so this was the seed of our research hypothesis, that effective inclusion and attention strategies need to start analyzing the groups of forcibly displaced people, looking for smaller and more homogeneous groups. And for these groups, we need to characterize what we call their vulnerability context, the context that causes that vulnerability. And this context depends on specific features of these forcibly displaced people, specific features also of the host communities, but also their history, their interactions, and their needs. To test our hypothesis, here we focus on what we consider particularly vulnerable groups among the forced displaced people. We are talking about unaccompanied minors, we are talking about women victims of violence, we are talking also about people with disabilities. So with information from this vulnerability context, we consider that we need to design, execute, assess, and review specific interventions, what we call the tailored attention and inclusion strategies. And all this process can only be done with the active participation of all the related stakeholders, particularly with involvement of the forcibly displaced people. So we did it using several rounds of pilots in which we were trying to characterize these concepts, the vulnerability context and the tailored attention and inclusion strategies, doing pilots to test them, and from that we extracted knowledge to, of course, continue with our research, but also to generate results that facilitate the adoption of the approach by other stakeholders, including, among others, recommendations, a methodology, and an observatory that is the key element for our sustainability approach. So we did it with a consortium that includes 8 partners in 7 different countries. These countries represent both transition and final destination countries for forcibly displaced people, both in Europe and Near and Middle East. Regarding the partners, the consortium includes universities, research organizations, and NGOs that in their countries collaborated with different stakeholders that bring to us their expertise, their knowledge, and of course, their networks. Over the 3.5 years of the project, we have the opportunity of experiencing firsthand the need of adaptation that our research hypothesis proposed. We went through the COVID-19 pandemics. We started also with some relevant events of the Syria crisis, and we are ending with the Ukrainian crisis. We also need to face the changes in the attitudes of our societies toward migrants and towards forcibly displaced people. So, for instance, because of the COVID-19 pandemics, we need to redesign our interactions with the forcibly displaced people and also discover new needs. So, just to give you some hints about the development of the project, we started with a fieldwork with more than 200 interviews with different types of stakeholders. In our pilots, we have developed 8 tailored attention and inclusion strategies with more than 180 direct beneficiaries. This implies more than 100 interviews with representatives of the different types of stakeholders that for us were, of course, forcibly displaced people, but also NGOs, civil society, policymakers, researchers, and businesses. And in our case, these representatives came from more than 100 organizations. And in the context of our dissemination efforts, we have already reached more than 100,000 people. The main research results of this project has been the concept and the characterization of the concept of vulnerability contests to characterize these specific situations that we want to address with our tailored attention and inclusion strategies. Also, metrics to characterize, to analyze the execution of these elements, a methodology to design and use all this framework, knowledge to extract recommendations for the different stakeholders that have collaborated with us. We have also developed some software tools to help us in some of the tasks of this methodology. And of course, we have been setting up the Observatory for the application of tailored attention and inclusion strategies in forced displacement. That is the piece where the basic piece of our sustainability effort to continue with this research after the project. So from here, I would like to invite you to join us in this observatory. So here I need also to inform you that part of the delegation coming from Lebanon is not going to be able to join us because some administrative problems. So we are not going to be able to have their collaboration here. Our best wishes for them from here. So I would like to end giving my most sincere thank yous to all that people that made this project possible, starting with the wonderful teams of all the partners, all the organizations that collaborated with us, and of course to the forcibly displaced people that after overcoming so many difficult situations, still wanted to collaborate and bring their experiences and expertise to us. So my most sincere thank you and welcome to this final conference again.